Do you think he'll find out, Mom? He's got that same look my daddy used to have, right before. Mama, I'm scared I'll end up like you. You remember to get everything prepared the last year? I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Mama. Keep your voice down. Walls in this house carry further than you think.
A year of planning her exit, a secret account quietly growing, and a husband standing just outside that door, saying nothing. But from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. What's really inside that account, and who the real danger in this story actually is about to come to light. My name is Quincy Thompson. I'm 42 years old. A good man doesn't announce what he carries. He just carries it. That belief carried me through 14 years of marriage, through 3 deployments overseas, through a career built on keeping other people safe, while I quietly managed my own private storms at 2 in the morning. It's the belief that let me smile through Sunday dinners and never once mention the things that kept me awake at night. It's also the belief that nearly cost me everything. Some nights, long after Jamila had fallen asleep beside me, I'd lie there replaying pieces of those deployments. Not the loud parts, the quiet ones. The specific weight of silence right before something went wrong. The sound of my own boots on gravel at 3 in the morning, half a world away from any bed. I never described those sounds to her. I told myself that keeping them out of our house was the same thing as protecting her from them. I understand now, those were never the same thing at all. On a Friday afternoon in late September, I sat in my office on the 28th floor of a building in the Loop, looking out over Lake Michigan, holding a pen over a set of divorce papers my lawyer had drawn up that same week. On my computer screen was a contract I'd just closed, a 2-year security consulting agreement worth $340,000. The biggest win of my career.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Folded in my jacket pocket was the reason I'd called that lawyer in the first place. A bank statement I'd found only a few days earlier, for an account I never knew existed. My wife's name was on it. So was a balance of $47,000.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Sit with that for a second.
I'm
A
sitting
man
with
who
it.
spent his whole career finding what other people were trying to hide. And I never saw this one coming. Not even a little. But here's the part that still keeps me up some nights. That account wasn't the strangest thing I found that week. It wasn't even the saddest thing. Before I tell you how a man who once cleared buildings for a living got blindsided in his own home, let me take you back to earlier that week. Because by the time I called that lawyer, my wife had already been planning her exit for a lot longer than I understood. I just didn't know it yet. It had been a Tuesday evening when it all started. Chicago does this thing in early fall where the light turns the color of weak tea and the wind off the lake starts reminding you winter isn't far behind. I'd left the office around 6:45, driven south on Lakeshore Drive with the window cracked the way I always did after a long day, and gotten home to Harper Avenue and Hyde Park a little after 7. The porch light was off. Not unusual. Jamila liked to save on the electric bill, one of 100 small habits left over from a childhood where money never stretched far enough. I let myself in, hung my coat on the hook by the door, and stood a second in a kitchen that felt too quiet. There was a sandwich on a plate on the counter, wrapped in plastic, gone cold. Turkey, the way I like it, mustard instead of mayo. Next to it, a note in Jamila's handwriting. 4 words. Don't wait up for me. I read it twice, the way you do when 4 words don't quite add up to the woman who wrote them. Jamila signed almost everything with a small heart under her initial. Grocery lists, birthday cards, even the post-its she left about the mail. This one had nothing underneath it, I noticed. I let myself believe it didn't mean anything. 14 years teaches you how to read the weight behind 4 words, the way another man might read a whole letter. I unwrapped the sandwich and ate it standing at the counter, alone, at 11 o'clock at night. Because some habits are older than the hurt that comes with them. That's when I went looking. Not out of suspicion exactly. More the same instinct that kept me alive on deployment and kept buildings safe on the job. Something in that house felt off. The way a room feels off when a door that's always shut is suddenly open a crack. I found it in the bottom drawer of my desk in the study, the one I hadn't opened in months. Underneath old invoices and expired warranties was a folder I didn't remember making. Inside were years of my own bank transfers. Money sent to Jamila for her marketing business startup.
Hi,
Money
Shamil.
sent
What's up?
quietly
What's
to her
up?
mother
How you
Indira
doing?
for bills Jamila never wanted to discuss at the dinner table. 5 years of numbers laid out in my own handwriting. Proof of everything I'd carried without ever once bringing it up. My hands stayed steady reading through it. The kind of stillness you drill into your body until it outlasts whatever's underneath it. It wasn't until I closed that folder that the shake finally caught up with me. In my fingers first, then my jaw, then one long breath I had to take before I trusted myself to stand up straight again. And underneath all of it, near the bottom, was a statement for an account with Jamila's name on it that I had never seen before. Opened 8 months ago. Balance, $47,000. I sat on the edge of that desk a long time that night. Not angry yet, just tired in a way that goes bone deep. I thought about every dangerous overnight shift I'd picked up on the South Side that I never told her about. Every quiet sacrifice I made because I thought that's what a good husband does. I thought I understood my wife. I thought 14 years had taught me every corner of her heart. 3 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office on the 28th floor and had the papers drawn up. Not out of rage, out of exhaustion. A man can only carry a secret so long before he stops trusting his own house. I thought I knew my wife. Turns out, I hadn't even scratched the surface. What I overheard 4 days after that, at her mother's kitchen table in Bronzeville, would tell me exactly how long this had really been coming. Sunday dinner at Indira Washington's house in Bronzeville had been a fixture of our marriage since the week Jamila and I got engaged. Fried catfish, greens cooked low and slow, a tablecloth Indira ironed every single week, whether company was coming or not. I used to love that house, the smell of it, the sound of gospel radio drifting out of the kitchen, the particular comfort of a place where nothing ever seemed to change. Compartment. I carried a sweet potato pie up the front steps like I had 100 times before. And I had no idea I was about to hear the sentence that would break something open in me for good. Jamila and her mother were. The door between the two rooms was barely open, just a few inches. And voices carried different in an old house. Soft but clear if you're standing in the right spot. He's got that same look Daddy used to have, Jamila said. So quiet I almost missed it. Right before. I'm scared, Mama. I stood there with a stack of plates in my hands and didn't move. The stack suddenly felt heavier than 4 dinner plates should. Behind me, gospel radio hummed low from a countertop speaker, some woman's voice rising sweet and steady on a hymn about deliverance, completely unbothered by what was happening 20 feet away. I remember thinking it was strange, how ordinary a house could sound, while something inside it was quietly ending. Indira's response came back easy, unbothered, like she was answering a question about seasoning the greens. You remember to get everything prepared the way I told you last year. Her hands never stopped moving over that pot of greens the whole time she said it. Steady, practiced, like a woman who'd rehearsed staying calm long before she ever needed to. Last year. Not last week. Not since I found that statement. A year. Whatever this was, whatever conversation had put that fear in my wife's eyes when she looked at me lately, it had been in motion for 12 months before I ever opened that drawer. I set the plaything had happened, because that's what I'd trained myself to do. Steady. Don't let the room see you shake. Indira telling the same story about the church bazaar. Black and enormous. Jamila sat in the passenger seat scrolling her phone, and I gripped that steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, saying nothing, because I didn't trust my voice not to give me away. My mind went back 3 years, to a night I hadn't let myself think about in a long time. I'd been offered a position as director of security for a firm in Houston. Double my salary, the kind of job a man spends 20 years building toward. First time whether that sacrifice had ever even registered with her at all. We drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind that isn't empty so much as full of things neither of us knew how to say yet. I watched the skyline slide by outside my window, all that glass and light, and thought about how a man could stand watch over glass towers 8 hours a day and still not see the walls going up in his own home. When we got home, Jamila went straight to bed, and I sat up in the study with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. I don't know exactly what made me open her laptop that night. It was sitting right there, unlocked, the way it always was, because we'd never had secrets between us. Or so I thought. Her calendar was full of appointments labeled only with initials. LB, 4 p.m. Every other Thursday, going back 8 months. I recognized the name eventually from an old insurance form in a drawer we shared. Dr. Lena Brooks. A therapist's office on the north side. 8 months of Thursday afternoons my wife had never mentioned to me. Cash payments, according to the Notes app entry beside each. Date. No insurance claim. No paper trail a husband might stumble across on a shared account. She'd been careful. Careful in a way that told me this wasn't about privacy. It was about making sure I never found out. I sat there with the cursor blinking on an empty search bar, throat tight, feeling like an intruder in my own marriage. 14 years, and I'd never once needed a password to know what was in my wife's calendar. That night, I didn't ask her for one either. I just closed the lid, quiet as I'd learned to close everything. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark a long time. 3 nights later, the nightmares came back.
I told you I was
They
out.
do that.
You
Not
expect
on a
me to
schedule,
believe that?
not when it's convenient. Just whenever the past decides it isn't. Finished with you yet. I woke up shouting, drenched, my hands still fighting too, but for a different reason. She wasn't scared of what I was dreaming. She was scared of me. She was out of that bed and out of the house before I'd even fully surfaced. I heard her car pull out of the driveway at 2:40 in the morning. She didn't come back for 3 days. When she finally did, she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, and she wouldn't tell me where she'd been, though I already knew. Bronzeville, her mother's house, the place she always ran to when she needed somewhere safer than home. I never raised my voice at my wife, not once in 14 years. Whatever she saw in me during those nightmares wasn't me. It was a shadow from somewhere else, somewhere she'd never let me see clearly enough to understand. I didn't know how long my wife had really been preparing to leave, and I didn't know how long her mother had known everything. The surgery money, the night shifts, Houston, all of it, while sitting across from me at that dinner table every single Sunday, smiling, asking me to pass the greens. What happened 2 weeks later in a hospital and open up one I hadn't even thought to ask. Was Indira protecting her daughter or quietly wrecking a marriage that never got a fair chance? Comment mother if you think a parent's fear justifies a year-long secret exit plan. Comment husband if you think hiding that from a faithful man is betrayal. Plain and simple. I've spent my whole career making sure other people never had to feel what fear actually does to a body. So there was something almost funny in a bitter kind of way about waking up in a hospital bed at the University of Chicago Medical Center in Hyde Park with 3 cracked ribs and a headache like a jackhammer, finally on the receiving end of the thing I'd spent 20 years protecting people from. It happened on a Thursday. A former employee went down wrong. Nothing dramatic to look at, just enough to crack 3 ribs and put me flat on my back for the second time in my life. The first being somewhere I don't talk about, a long way from Illinois. I remember the ceiling tiles of that hospital room better than I remember most of that week. White, with a water stain shaped like the state of Michigan. I remember counting them because it kept my mind off the pain, and it was easier than thinking about anything else. For a moment, my mind flipped backward, unbidden, to a different ceiling. Corrugated metal, harsh fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic doing nothing against the smell of something worse underneath it. That memory surfaces sometimes on its own, uninvited, whenever my body remembers what stillness under pain actually costs. I let it pass the way I always did. I counted tiles instead. Jamila got there around 6 that evening. I heard her before I saw her. That particular sound of dress shoes moving too fast down a hospital hallway. And when she came through the door, her face just broke. She hadn't seen me like that in a long time, maybe ever, not really. I'd always been the one standing at the door with keys in hand, the one who checked the locks twice, the one who made her feel like nothing bad could get through as long as I was standing in front of it. Now I was lying flat under a thin blue blanket with a tube in my arm. And for the first time in 14 years, she was looking at a man who couldn't protect anybody, including himself. She sat down in the chair beside the bed and cried without trying to hide it. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, though I didn't understand yet what exactly she thought she had to be sorry for. Her phone buzzed on the little rolling table between us. I wasn't trying to look, but the screen lit up bright in that dim room, and the notification sat there long enough for me to read it clearly before she grabbed the phone and turned it face down. Safety plan. Reminder. Documents ready for attorney review. My pulse didn't spike the way you'd expect. It went the other way. Slow, careful. The exact rhythm I used to talk myself into during the worst 30 seconds of a job gone wrong. Whatever was coming, I needed to hear all of it clearly, not through the fog of my own reaction. Not a folder of vague notes. Documents. Sitting on my wife's phone like something she'd built carefully over time, with an actual attorney attached to it, the way you'd prepare a case, not say a marriage. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched her face while she realized what I'd seen. Watched the color drain out of it, the way it does when somebody knows there's no explaining their way backward out of a moment. "Jamila," I said, quiet. "What is that?" She was shaking by the time she answered, her hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup like it was the only steady thing left in the room. "I'm scared I'm going to end up repeating my mother's history," she said. "I've been scared of it for a long time, Quincy." I didn't know how to say it out loud. I lay there in that hospital bed and let that sentence settle over me. And underneath the hurt, something else started surfacing. A memory I hadn't let myself examine too closely in 2 years. Indira's heart surgery. Coronary bypass, done quietly at a hospital on the north side. Paid for almost entirely out of a savings account I'd built up specifically for emergencies nobody else knew about. I told the billing office not to send a single piece of paperwork to the house. I told Jamila her mother's insurance had covered more than it actually had. I did it because I loved that woman like she was my own mother, complicated as things sometimes were between us. And because I never wanted Jamila carrying the weight of watching her mother's heart get cut open, while also worrying about how they'd pay for it. I never told a soul. Not Jamila, not Indira, beyond a card I'd slipped into her hospital bag that she probably never even connected to me. And now I was lying in a bed of my own, learning that while I'd been quietly carrying my wife's entire family without asking for a shred of recognition, she had been quietly building an exit. With a lawyer, with paperwork, month after month. Protecting herself, she said, from a version of me that lived only in her fear, not in anything I had ever actually done. "I'm not your father," I said finally. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "I have never once raised a hand to you. Not once." "I know that," she said, and she meant it. I could see that she meant it. But knowing it in my head and believing it in my body have never been the same thing for me. Not since I was 7 years old. Her fear had never really been about me. It was about a 7-year-old girl who learned that love could turn dangerous without warning, and who grew into a woman whose body still trusted old alarm bells over 14 years of quiet, unbroken evidence to the contrary. That secret folder wasn't cruelty. It was control. The only kind of safety she'd ever been taught actually worked. More than anything, she wanted to never again be caught off guard by a man she loved, even if the man in question had never once given her cause. That was the first time in 14 years my wife had said anything close to the truth about her childhood out loud, and it landed heavier than any accusation could have. I didn't have the strength that night to ask her everything I wanted to ask. The pain medication was pulling me under, and there's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from finally understanding something you should have seen years earlier. I just reached over, slow, careful, my ribs screaming with every inch, and took her hand. She let me hold it. She didn't pull away. But I could feel, even through that small gesture, how much distance still sat between us, built up over years neither one of us had been honest about. Outside the window, the city kept moving the way it always does, indifferent to whatever's breaking inside a hospital room 11 floors up. I watched a single boat cut a slow line across the lake and thought, absurdly, that even boats know better than to stop moving once they've started. I didn't feel that certain about anything. I thought I was the only person in that marriage hiding something. Lying there under fluorescent lights, with a phone notification about attorney paperwork burned into my mind. I understood that I had been wrong about that, too. What her own mother said to me the very next morning, sitting in that same chair while Jamila stepped out for water, would turn out to be the truth neither one of us had been brave enough to speak in 30 years. Morning in a hospital room feels nothing like night. The machines are the same. The walls are the same. But the light comes in different, flatter, more honest somehow. And whatever unraveled in the dark the night before has a way of looking a little more real by daylight. That's the kind of morning it was when Indira Washington walked through my door at 9 sharp, dressed like she was heading to a church board meeting, a foil-covered plate of biscuits balanced in one hand like an offering. Jamila stepped out to get coffee and water down the hall, and for the first time in 14 years, my mother-in-law and I were alone in a room together with nowhere else for either of us to look. She set the plate down. She didn't sit right away. She stood at the foot of that hospital bed for a long moment, arms crossed, studying me the way you'd study a photograph you hadn't looked at in years. "I owe you the truth," she said finally. "Whether either one of us wants to hear it right now or not." She smoothed her skirt with both hands, twice. An old habit I recognized because Jamila did the exact same thing whenever she was working herself up to something hard. I'd never once put those two gestures side by side until that morning, sitting there watching 30 years of inherited nervousness play out in front of me. I didn't say anything. I'd learned a long time ago that silence gets people talking faster than questions do. She sat down slowly in the chair Jamila had been in the night before, and her voice, when it came again, had lost every